Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Limit Podcast with Phil and Matt Gibson here. Season 1, Episode 3. Phil, it's hard to believe this is episode number 3, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So just right off the beginning here, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the Limit Podcast. Follow us on Facebook, all of the social medias. And then, Phil, I know you've been working a little bit in the shop there. What you got?
Oh, I've been another sneak peek of this. This is a half ounce, and it's pretty compact. Like you can see it in front of my hand. So that's coming. I'm hoping we'll have some available on Tackle Warehouse on our site within a month to 6 weeks. By May, I hope. That's our goal. Right now, we're just trying to get the packaging and everything nailed down. So I'm excited about a lot of good things that we got coming from PH. Here's a little glide I got coming. Look at it's got gills and everything on it. I mean, like really nice gills, real symmetrical. So I got a lot of stuff coming. It's just finding enough time to get it all going,
Yep, absolutely. So I know tonight is our guest is someone that you've known for a long time and somebody that's really inspirational to all of us anglers, especially here in Indiana. Good friend of yours. You want to kind of introduce our guest today?
Yeah. I'd say he's more like a brother than a friend. I mean, I feel fortunate to have friends like him and Jennifer and the kids. I might have been there when both kids were born. So I'm really excited to have Billy on as the first guest. So we're going to have 2 times Elite Series winner Bill Lowen on here.
All right, let's bring Billy on.
Hey, guys, how are you doing?
Hey, Bill. Good. How are you?
Well, I'm great, but I was getting ready to start crying here. I thought Phil was going to start crying there for a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't say I was your best friend.
I said Phil's getting ready to start crying.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Let's see. When was it? How long ago did you win Tennessee at Pickwick?
That's been 4 years ago, I believe.
I did cry, and I think I called your dad, and we cried together. Yeah, it was, and I almost cried this time.
I don't know what it is about them wins, but I get a lot of people calling me or just sending me messages that say, "Man, you made me cry." So for all of you that I made cry, I didn't do that on purpose. I apologize, but I hope I make you cry again.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
Yeah. So Bill, I mean, you've had just one heck of a start to the season here. Congratulations on that. The win with St. John's River, Santee Cooper was an awesome finish for you too, and just a really, really solid year. So first off, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome. So.
The big thing about Billy is I know this for a fact because we're also team partners. We've elk hunted together, deer hunted, shared leases, duck hunted. Only I don't duck hunt with him so much anymore because there's not a lot of ducks. The year I had cancer, I duck hunted with him a bunch because they carried all the decoys for me. I just went along and rode the boat, and they're like, "Oh, we'll do it. You got cancer." So that's the last year. I guess I hunted a lot, wasn't it, Billy?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I hunted a lot. But
just admitted to the world that you're lazy.
I was that year. Everybody else has got on waders. I didn't even put on a pair of waders the whole fall. But the thing I'm proudest about Billy and being his friend is I know this for a fact. If once they announced the schedule, if they were going to Toledo Bend and I said something about Toledo Bend, I might not even know what the schedule is. He goes, la, 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 immediately. I know for a fact Bill Lowen does not get help, doesn't ask for help, doesn't want help.
Well,
and he wouldn't even talk to me in Florida when he was leading because he was afraid I might screw up. So Jennifer's like, he'll talk to you after it's all over. So,
well, you got to be so careful, and years and years ago, we had the ability to be able to get help or get information and things like that. But, anymore, it's just, you just got to be really careful what you say. You got to kind of stop conversations. But you know what? We're not going to talk about that stuff on here. We're not going to talk about any of the negativity, any of that stuff that's going on. I think first off, we got to thank or congratulate Easton Fothergill for winning the Bassmaster Classic. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
it was a dominating performance. You know what I mean? Whether you like forward facing sonar or not, it's, look, let's face it, it's the best technology we've ever seen when it comes to fishing. And if you have the ability to use it, you better use it, or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
You talked about a little bit about the success that I've been having this year. And over the last couple years, it hasn't been like that. I've been struggling. Last year was my worst year on tour, where I finished, I believe, 85th in the points. First year ever in my career that I've been below the cut line. But with that being said, I was fighting do I buckle down on this forward facing sonar? Do I fish my traditional, shallow water power fishing techniques? And I was fighting it at every event. I had a lot of demons going on in my head. And this year, to start off, I basically told Jennifer, look, something's got to change. We got to go back to what I have always been known for, being so consistent. I got the nickname Dollar Bill by being so consistent. And after that win at Pickwick, I kind of lost that because all I wanted to do was win again, right? Basically in the past, I would put the boat in the water and fish for a limit, fish for a check. And then if I had the opportunity to win, then so be it. But after that win at Pickwick, it kind of changed my game plan. I wanted to win again. And then we threw forward-facing sonar on that. And I got hung up with all that and just trying to fight all that. And Phil knows, because we talked about it so much, that I felt like every time I put the boat in the water, I had to be focusing on learning that technology and not concentrating on what I was doing. And I struggled. And like I said, this year I said, look, here's how we're going to do this, and Mega Live 2 from Humminbird came, which is an amazing piece of equipment, which finally I had the confidence where I felt like I had a live transducer that I could compete with. But I told myself, I said, look, I'm going to use live when I know I have to, let's say a Lake St. Clair, somewhere like that. But when we're places where I can fish my style, that's what we're going to do. We're going to fish for checks. We're going to try to qualify for classics, and to start the year out with a win, fishing the way that we love to fish. I had my forward-facing sonar on, but I was using it to look at isolated pieces of cover in deep water. Never caught a single fish off of it. I just fished, had fun. And that's what I used to do in the past. And that's what we're going to do the rest of the year. And it started out so well. I couldn't be more thankful. But like I said, the last couple of years have been pretty rough. And to start off with and get my confidence back, because my confidence was in the toilet. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be honest with you. So to start out the year like I have, it's been phenomenal.
No, and to kind of bring this all full circle and talk a little bit about, Bass University. That's the first time that I saw you present, Bill, and do a seminar there. And the very first time I saw you, your presentation was limit getters. And I've molded a lot of what I do, tournament fishing, behind that. Is that kind of what you went back to? Is more that limit getter mentality? Is that kind of what changed this year?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I've always been known for being so consistent. Dave Mercer nicknamed me Dollar Bill because I was always cashing checks. Yeah. And to go out and get a limit, or just go out and maybe try to catch enough to where you're going to get paid, is what I would always try to do. But like I said, after that win at Pickwick, it was like, what do we got to do to win again? We got to go try to catch big ones. And I wasn't so much worrying about catching a limit. You know what I mean? And I can just remember looking back on all the things I did and all the chances I took, and show up without a limit a lot of times. And I was like, something's got to change. Like, missed a couple classics in a row. I want to get back to the classic. You know what I mean? So to be able to go back to, like you said, the Bass University limit getters, and kind of rethink my approach. I guess I didn't need to really rethink it. I just had to apply it again, because I was applying that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead of fishing with my 5/16 ounce jig to get a limit, I'm pitching a half ounce trying to catch a big one. So that's kind of the way I went into the start of the year. You know what I mean? And honestly, truly, I never had any idea that I was on the caliber of fish I was on in Florida. I'd had some bites in them areas. I think the biggest fish I caught in the first 2 days of practice was a heavy 3-pounder. Last day of practice, I caught a 5-pounder. right at the end of the day, but in a totally different creek. So I felt like I had a creek I could get out of there in one piece with, or maybe get a check. But after the first day and the first hour, I caught 20 pounds pitching a jig around. I was like, oh boy, you might have really found something. And like I said, blessed that it worked out the way it did. But with that being said, I've kind of retrained my thought process here to go back to, basically limit getters. You know what I mean?
Yep,
and then if a opportunity arises where we may have a shot to win, then so be it. But I'm going to go get a limit, cash a check, qualify for a classic, and if the blue trophies come along the way, then so be it.
And let's not forget that you also went to Okeechobee the next week and did really good. And then you went to your first MPFL at Santee Cooper, and I thought for a while you might be maybe going to win that, and you finished fourth?
Fourth, and Jason Christie shows up with some 35-pound bags.
Crazy.
Yeah. When you get home, I could use some money.
Yeah, well, the NPFL is a really cool deal, in that they're the only tour that banned forward-facing sonar. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of buzz about, hey, how is that going to go? How's it going to work? And to be able to back the boat in the water, and know that we were just going fishing was really cool.
Yeah.
We still have the ability to use DI, SI, traditional sonar. We can use 360, but the live real-time image is not available. One of the coolest things, though, that has come about with MPFL is that Fisher, my son, which he's 13, has the ability to go practice with me.
That's really cool.
And Fisher's been on the road with me ever since he was born, and that was the first event that he ever got to go out and see what Dad does from daylight to dark. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was cool for him, and we got 5 events left at the MPFL. He'll get to have the opportunity to practice with me if he wants. So I mean, when you talk about getting the youth involved or whatever, well, I mean, what better place than to be able to put them in the boat and take them with you and show you a practice tournament scenario.
And look, he's barely a teenager. He just turned 13. I mean, he's little. It's not like you're taking your 17-year-old son out there.
Right, exactly.
So think of the knowledge as you continue to fish these. That think of how far ahead of the game Fisher's going to be by the time he's big enough to fish if he chose to do so.
Right, exactly.
He will have seen all the good places.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
That's something that. Go ahead. That's something that we used to do. If you remember, me and you and Jimmy Pickett would get in a truck and we'd go practice somewhere, just go fishing somewhere that you were going to fish later in the summer. And then as the rules changed, like I'm not allowed to go anywhere with Billy because I've been to about all them places. So we can't go fish for fun. Like we live 3.5 hours from St. Clair and we go up there. But every time that St. Clair's on the schedule, then him and I can't go up there all.
Yeah, we can't go. Can't talk about it. Can't whatever.
Yeah, we can't go have fun. We can't. And we've had a lot of fun up there. We got a couple stories up there. One about the Coast Guard, but I don't know if Billy wants to tell it or not.
When the Coast Guard shows up with a machine gun, when the Coast Guard shows up with a machine gun and tells you probably need to move. I mean, we didn't know. I mean, we were in an area where there was no buoys, no whatever. But after 9/11 and things like that, when you get too close to certain type areas, when they come over the loudspeaker and say, "Hey, y'all need to leave," and then you see a guy with a machine gun, it's time to go.
And then he says, "Remember, hey, there couldn't have been any of them more than 20. Am I right?"
Yeah.
We didn't even know. They come down there and one of them said, "Can't you read the sign?" And we're like, "What sign?"
Yeah.
They never laughed or smiled or nothing. They were like, "Get out of here.
Be quiet. Time for us to go."
Yeah.
That's great.
I've had a lot of fun. I made a lot of good friends that would have never happened if you weren't in a boat.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with those different events that you're fishing, Bill, do you go into those? You have MPFL, BASS. You fish some other formats as well. With those different formats, does it change how you go into a tournament, or is it just fishing at the end of the day?
I think as an angler, and I think so many times we make it way too difficult, right? And what I mean by that is I think we put too much emphasis on, wherever we're going fishing, whether that be the Ohio River, the Great Lakes, St. John's River, just wherever you're going, right? I think we put too much thought into it a lot of times. And some guys may be the best way that they can attack a tournament or a new body of water. But for me, doesn't matter if I'm fishing the elites, if I'm fishing the NPFLs, if I'm fishing an open, if I'm fishing a BFL on the Ohio River. I attack all of them exactly the same, okay? And what I mean by that is I don't ever try to get any preconceived notion on what I'm going to do when I get to a body of water, okay? People ask me all the time, hey, what body of water are you looking forward to the most? And there's never one that I'm looking forward to the most, okay? And the reason that is because when I show up in an event, I want to start there with a fresh mind. I want to fish the conditions that are going on, because very rarely ever are the conditions exactly the same from the last time you were there. Even if it's the same week of the same month, it doesn't matter. It's always different. You know what I mean? So by showing up with no preconceived notion, fishing the conditions, fishing exactly what's going on in front of you, I've noticed that over the years of my career, I've always done better when I do that. Okay. Now, if I say, well, I'm going to go to Lake Erie and I'm going to go out to Pelee Island and that's where I'm going to spend my tournament. When I do stuff like that, that's when I have my worst events that I ever have, right? Instead of what I call fishing by the seat of my pants, you know what I mean? And I always hate to bring up the Ohio River, but if the Ohio River has done anything for me in my career, it has taught me how to fish the conditions, because it changes by the hour, and it has taught me how to fish by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, and I think when people hear and you mentioned the Ohio River, I don't think they really realize how tough that place can be. Like if you're from California or you're from out west or down south, you may not understand how tough that Ohio River can really be.
It may be the worst in the country. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I love the river, and so does Billy, because Billy was raised, he could almost throw a rock from his house to the river. But it's probably the worst fishery except for a month in the spring in the country, wouldn't you think, Billy?
Well, let's just put it in perspective. All right.
One of the toughest.
For those of you that don't know, and I always say that the Ohio River is absolutely, to me, the toughest fishery in the country, right? And I know there's going to be some people that are going to argue that, but that's where I learned how to fish, right? So let's say like in the springtime when they're really biting, and we're going to base all this just out of Tanners Creek in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, because that's where I grew up. That's where I learned how to fish. Now in the spring, when they're really biting, like that 10 to 12 pounds a day is like a super bag. You're probably going to win, right? If they're really, really biting and somebody catches a 5 or 6 pounder, they may weigh in 14 pounds, but that very rarely happens, right?
And that's when it's on fire.
Yeah, that's when it's on fire. Now look, back in the day when people were salting holes and bringing big farm pond fish in and kind of, putting them in certain areas, you might catch an 18-pound bag, but I haven't seen an 18-pound bag in at least 20 years, right? But what I'm getting at is, when they're really biting, a 10 or 12-pound bag is huge. In the summertime, when it's horrible, 6 to 8 pounds is going to win probably everything. I mean, a 2-day super tournament out of Tanners Creek takes 8 pounds a day to win every single time it shows up, right?
And you win easily too.
And you win easily. But with that being said, half the field's probably going to have one fish or zero. And look, that's not slouches. That is the best Ohio River fishermen that we have in the area, So, like I said, I always hate to harp on it, but that Ohio River has taught me that from start to finish, you better be paying attention to what's going on. You better stay focused the whole time. I never get down, no matter how bad. Like if I only got 4 at the end of the day, and we saw that at the St. John's River, I grind till the last minute because that's what the Ohio River's taught me to do, right? And then I look at guys like you mentioned a minute ago that may have grew up in Texas or Alabama or California, where they're accustomed to getting 30, 40, 50 bites a day, right? I've never been accustomed to that. Like every time I put the boat in the water, I knew I was fishing for 5 bites, and then 5 bites are going to be 12 inches. I mean, that's what I was fishing for. And if I was fortunate enough to catch a good fish, a 3-pounder along the way, then so be it. But if anything for me, it has made my mental game as tough as I feel like it could possibly be.
Yeah, and guys that didn't grow up in this southern Indiana, Cincinnati, northern Kentucky area, they think you're exaggerating, but you're exactly right. If you get 5 keeper bites in a BFL in July, chances are you just finished in the top 5, unless you just happen to catch 5 of the skinniest 12 inchers in the river. You're definitely going to be up there in the top against 80. I mean, it used to get 200 boats sometimes, but they don't have them anymore. But it'll be 60 boats of the hammers within 100 miles, won't it, Billy?
Makes you want to load the boat up and go fishing, doesn't it?
Yep.
People ask me all the time, where my favorite place in the world to fish is, and I say it's the Ohio River, and they look at me like I got 2 heads, right? But look, NPFL, Bassmaster Elites, they take us to the best bodies of water at the best time of the year, the best moon phases, the best whatever. Mm-hmm. So you're going to catch them, right? Yeah. It's just a matter of, are they going to be big enough to compete, right? Every time you put that boat in the Ohio River, it's a matter of, are you even going to get a bite? You know what I mean? Because there's days still that I could go down there and fish daylight to dark and never get a single bite. I mean, I might get a rock bass bite or something, but I may never put my hands on a largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, spotted bass all day long. And that's what I love about it. I love the challenge. I love the unknown. I love trying to break it down and figure out that puzzle. But still, to this day, and I've been fishing full time now for 20 years, it still chews me up and spits me out.
Could you imagine telling Lee Livesey, hey, dude, you're going to have to put 12-pound line on a 7.3 medium heavy and throw an 1/8 ounce pillhead jig with hair on it and a one-on-one chomp? Yeah. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Tell Texas guys that's what you're going to have to throw today to catch.
Lee Livesey would probably love that, because he's got a place right there on the Sabine River. So I mean, he's used to them kind of little small limits. I mean, the Sabine River has really got some good fish in it, but day in and day out, there's a lot of 12 inches. Well,
yeah. Well, you know what I like is, and I know that the people that are listening are going to want to hear it, because that's one thing I've heard. Even though it's our first one, a lot of people have watched the first 2, and everyone has said, "Hey, we liked hearing about how you and Matt fished with Zebco 33s when you were 8, and you fished with the jelly worm." And I know from fishing with Billy, we've spent I don't know how many hours. We'll be up in Muddy Creek, and he'll be like, "Hey, dude, right here under this bridge, one time a big buck come down here, and me and Josh McCreary, his brother-in-law, we missed him. He's like, I shot at him with the bow, like right here." And everywhere we go in the river, we both got stories like that, don't we? Or hey, I used to kill ducks right here all the time, and Billy has a lot of stories about how he started and what his dad did to help him get to where he is, and I think people would like to hear some of that.
Well, I think we all have stories. And everybody's obviously is different. I was very fortunate growing up that my dad was a tournament angler. My dad back in the day was, now that I know what I know, he was kind of a local stick, I guess, if you want to call it that. But there come kind of that point where he kind of stepped out of tournament fishing, and then I kind of jumped in with both feet, you know what I mean? But so he was a tournament fisherman, like I said, and I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and I can remember him taking me to Tanner's with him to practice. And heck, I don't even know if I fished then. I probably played in the water or had my feet hanging over the side. You know what I mean? I can remember, like, if he'd catch one in practice, like, let me put it in the live well, let me turn the live wells on. And I can remember things like that. But, I think the thing that stands out the most to me, and I'll never, ever be able to thank my father enough for, what he did for me in the outdoors growing up. We had a 16-foot aluminum Lowy bass boat with a 35 horse Evinrude on it, a trolling motor. It was just your nuts and bolts bass boat. But my dad didn't have a lot of money growing up. We never, how do I say this? We never got probably what we wanted, but we never went without, if that makes sense. Yeah, I may have wanted a pair of Nike gym shoes, but I got Adidas or ponies. You know what I mean?
You got what you needed, though.
I got what I needed to survive. And, looking back on that now, that means a lot. It builds character. When things like that happen, it shows you what hard work gets you growing up. But what he did for me at Tanner's Creek on the Ohio River, like, during spring breaks and just during times when we were out of school, he would take me to Tanner's Creek, drop me off with the boat, right? Now I'm 14-ish. I'm not old enough to drive, right? Nowadays, child services would be showing up at the house like, Mr. Lowen, we need to talk to you about your son down here on the river. But so he would take me, drop me off, and I had 2 trolling motor batteries, right? Now, this is at Tanner's Creek. You guys are both familiar with Tanner's Creek. So I knew how far that I could fish up Tanner's Creek with 1 trolling motor battery. And I had 1 more to get me back to the ramp, right? Now, the rule was is I was not allowed to start the big motor. And you never dare did because you didn't want to lose that privilege, right? So I don't know if it was a year or so probably that I got stuck in Tanner's Creek, and then he started getting a little looser and a little freer. Then I could start the big motor and I could go to Wilson's Creek, which is the first creek downriver from Tanner's. And then my next big adventure was Hogan's Creek, right? So growing up as a
2
kid,
miles down, it's still not far, is it?
Yeah, not very far. So growing up as a kid, I knew where every stump, every rock, every dock, you know what I mean? And still to this day, there's stumps that are there that I know I can like literally run right to them and pitch a bait on them. But for him to do that, you know what I mean? And have the trust in me to, go and do that. That's kind of molded me to where I am today for sure. You know what I mean? Without a doubt, and guys are just like, well, how'd you become such a good fisherman on the Ohio River? Well, it was because of my father doing that, him being a tournament fisherman. But there was always other people too in my life that kind of helped me along the way. You know what I mean? A really good friend of mine named Brian Wolfley. A lot of the guys that are going to watch this know who Brian Wolfley is, one of the best marine mechanics in the area, if not the best. We nicknamed him Dr. River years ago. One of the best river fishermen that there ever was or is. And he kind of took me under my wing. And a funny story was like, Phil mentioned I was in walking distance of the Ohio River, right? I lived in a little town called Addiston, Ohio, which is right basically an Ohio River town, but it was in walking distance of Muddy Creek, right? And Muddy Creek was one of Brian's favorite creeks to fish in, right? And we'd walk all the way down there as a kid, Zebco 33s, yellow rooster tails, beetle spins, and we'd catch the fish out of there, all the bass, and we'd put them in a basket, and we'd take them home, and we'd clean them, and every day he'd come in there on a Saturday or Sunday to fish a tournament. There we were, right? So when I guess I finally got about 15 or 16 years old, he finally said, "Hey, you want to go fishing with me? Like, you want to fish tournaments with me?" And I think part of it was just to get me out of there. We weren't catching his fish, but he kind of, like I said, took me under his wing and showed me how to fish the Ohio River, especially the main river. The main river on the Ohio River is intriguing to a lot of people, and just that it's confuses them. And he kind of showed me at an early age how to do all that, and I'll be thankful for that forever. But with that being said, it just always seemed like there was somebody in my life that was trying to help me, whether it be hunting, fishing, waterfowl, whitetail deer, whatever that was, or just life in general. You know what I mean? There's so many people that are, I guess you could say, responsible for me being where I am today. Because had they not done that, we might not be having this podcast tonight.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's great too when you think back on those things. Because I was very fortunate as a kid too. I grew up on the Kokomo Reservoir, which I don't know, you probably call it the Ohio River of north central Indiana. Real tough place. And yeah, my dad actually got a waiver from the DNR to allow me to run a boat there when I was 13, 14 years old, saying he wouldn't, as long as I wasn't causing any trouble out there, he'd let me fish all I wanted. So that there's nothing like growing up in the outdoors and having those mentors that you can lean on to when you're confused about something, or you just have questions about, hey, how should I treat this on the water, or how should I treat someone on the water, things like that. And that's it really is a great lifestyle to grow up in the
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is too is I know this because I've been around Billy's family a lot. The same way with my dad, and I don't know your dad, but I bet it was the same. If we would have been disrespectful to somebody on the water, my dad would have whacked us in the back of the head with his open hand. You know what I mean? He wouldn't have tolerated it. And I know Taco, that's Billy's dad's nickname. We all call him Taco. He would have never, he'd have been embarrassed if you'd acted that way, wouldn't he, Billy?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd have been like, and you know, like he was talking about, like we were all three of us were really, really lucky because my aunt and uncle, my Uncle Jim and my Aunt Margie, it was my dad's sister. They had a place on a little lake here called Man Love. It might be like, I don't even think it's 100 acres. And seems like we all started with a 35 horse motor, and we would go out there and stay with her. And Dad would put that boat in the water, and their camper was right on the grass, you know, on the edge of the water. And me and my brother would go out and fish most of the day. They would have us come in to eat, and you know, we would come in and then go night fish most of the night. And I don't remember when we slept out there. And it was some of my fondest memories growing up was fishing at Man Love Park, and it was literally a fish factory. Like you could like wreck them out there.
Yeah. And yeah, it's great. And it's great growing up in the outdoors like that. So last week we had Mario Mills on the podcast, and he told us the story of meeting Phil. So Bill, how did you meet Phil, and how long have you known Phil?
Well, you know, let me rephrase this. I've known of Phil for a really long time because whether he likes to admit it or not, he is like a local legend, basically, right?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like, if you go to his shop, he's got boxes of plaques, and he'll always show them to you. Like, look at all these plaques I got. You know what I mean?
I do not.
Yes, you do all the time, right?
Well, to you, but not to everybody that comes in.
I think you got a tattoo of one of your plaques on your arm, don't you?
I told him when he won the other day, I said, well, I'm glad you finally started listening to me. And that's we do each other like that, because if you see his trophy room, it's like really impressive.
He always says, like, I don't care any about the money. I just want the plaque, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
He was like, if you were going to Monroe or Patoka or, you know, some of the main fisheries that we have in Indiana, Phil was always like doing really well or winning. You know what I mean? He was like stuffing bass with lead sinkers to make them weigh more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, catching these big 30-pound bags. And no, I'm just joking. But he was always like that guy. You know what I mean? Like if you were going to those events, like Phil was and his partner, whoever he was with, you know, he was the team to beat. And I've spent a lot of time in a boat with Phil, right? And look, I'm predominantly a shallow water angler, like grinding the trolling motor in the mud. But if I got to fish offshore, I can, and I don't have a problem with that. But Phil is honestly probably the best offshore fisherman that I've ever been in a boat with. And I'm not talking about like using electronics and things like that, but he is really good with that. I'm talking about being able to triangulate and keep the boat off of a piece of cover and make the cast that you have to make to get that deep diving crankbait to hit the cover and things like that. But he's really, really good at that. Like I said, probably the best deep water angler I've ever been in the boat with. So like to answer your question, like I always kind of knew who Phil was. And then, you know, you run into him.
I don't even remember how we met. So I don't even remember.
I remember. I mean, like you'd see him on the water and, you know, whatever. And, you know, he started way before I did, you know, competitive fishing. You know, I think I got really serious about competitive fishing when I was probably, I mean, I tournament fish, you know what I mean? But I was like, I'd fish a local tournament on the river. I wouldn't catch nothing. And like guys would be bringing in 12 pounds and I'd be like, they're cheating. You know what I mean? Like, how can I zero and how can they catch 12 pounds? But so I'd kind of run into Phil and knew of him and, you know, knew he was a hothead and like was always yelling at people on the water. And I grew up in, like I said, Addiston, Ohio, my whole life. And then I guess about, 15, 17, 20 years ago, whatever that is, we moved from Ohio to Indiana. And I moved to Brookville, Indiana, right? And
I actually found your house, remember?
Yeah, actually found my house. So then,
so we actually were kind of friends before then.
Yeah. So he's like, hey, dude, look, there's a house out here. It's perfect. It's got a building. So we moved out there, which is only 45 minutes from where we did live in Ohio. Moved out there, got moved in, and then he never left. Like he just stayed, like like a stray dog. We kind of fed him, and he never went away. I'll tell you a funny story. Like we moved into the house, right? He's helping. We're moving in appliances. We moved the brand new refrigerator. Just get it in.
I knew you was going to bring that up.
Beautiful. The refrigerator is awesome. There's a hammer on top of the refrigerator, right? And he's like very clumsy. Okay, I mean he's a carpenter. He's a paramedic. He makes balsa baits, but he's really clumsy. Okay, so he reaches up there and he grabs the hammer, and when he goes to pull it off the top of the refrigerator, he drops it. It hits the floor, bounces up, and the claw sticks right in the door of the refrigerator.
And you wouldn't believe the size of the dent. I'm like, how can that happen?
Yeah,
I wanted to just go get in my truck and leave. Because Billy, that's probably your first refrigerator you ever bought, wasn't it?
First refrigerator I ever bought.
And I put a big dent in it.
And Phil's comment was, let's just put a magnet over top of it. Nobody will ever see it. So, yeah. I think we might have lost Matt.
Huh?
I think we might have lost
Matt.
Yeah,
we did. Yeah. But I was, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Even though I've won on the river before I met you and stuff, I was always jealous because you did better. I could catch them in the lakes, and we got to be friends. And you know this, and it's still that way some today, is we have different styles of fishing. Even though I think that makes us good fishing together. But you remember fishing with me at the river, and I'm flipping a 1/2 ounce jig in a foot of water, and you're like, why are you doing that? And you're flipping a little 5/16 ounce jig, and you just kicked my teeth in, and you lose me now.
Nope, I still got you.
Yeah, that's pretty bad when you lose the tech guy, ain't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was always jealous of you because you guys, at the time, you were fishing with Sean Weeda a lot, and you fished with Josh, and you guys, man, you did really good, consistently. And I remember you won several $10,000 guaranteed events, which was a really big deal then. And it still would be today, but where we live, there's not hardly any of those kind of events left anymore. But so I know that meeting you and fishing with you helped me a lot. It kind of broadened my horizon, made me a little more versatile, because I grew up fishing on Brookville, and in the early years of Brookville, you had lots of trash piles and lots of timber, and it was just a target rich deal. The timber was so thick. And then I would fish at Patoka and Monroe, where you remember back in the day, seriously, with a 6 fish limit, you could weigh in 30 pounds at Monroe when they were up in the bushes. And you did that with those big baits and 25-pound fluorocarbon. And then I get with you, and you're throwing little 5/16 ounce jigs with a baby beaver on the back, a smallie beaver and 17-pound fluorocarbon. And I'm thinking, and a little 2/0 or 3/0 hook. And I'm thinking, you can't land in fish like that. But I learned the hard way.
It's all in where you grew up and what you was accustomed to doing. I miss that heyday of Monroe being so good and Patoka being so good, when those bodies of water had grass and things in them like that. I miss that. I came onto the scene right as when all that was going away, when they were starting to implement slot limits. And you remember all that on Patoka, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could weigh in a fish under 12 inches or one over, was it 16?
Yeah, because there was a time you could catch 100 a day under 14 inches, and that's not an exaggeration at all. No. It was like anything you ever saw.
So I missed the heyday of the big fish on those bodies of water. But I grew up on the Ohio River, where if you didn't downsize or didn't fish those smaller style baits,
you got beat, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And guys that like one thing that always that I think about, I think about this a lot, and you and I have talked about it, is there were so many local guys in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky who we both grew up who were older than us. and some of those guys are still alive. And I actually went on to be team partners with a couple of them, and man, we did really, really good. Those guys, like I remember when I learned to fish offshore was with like Gary Hardwick and Melvin Belt, who's now passed away, and Dave Bennett was like always like a hero to me. He never knew that because we probably fished 200 tourneys together, but he was always like my hero. But I remember like I got my first graph was Lowrance, like maybe like an X15 paper graph.
Right.
And these young guys don't have a clue what that is. And you could actually handle it. And you would get the, like the lead, or like, you know, like when you write with a lead pencil, you would get that black stuff on your hands. We never had GPSs, and you had to use marker buoys, and we had flashers and paper graphs. And then, you know, Lowrance come out with the Eagle paper graphs. And I remember when I first saw my first LCR, they called them back then, remember? I thought, and they were electronic, you know.
Yeah, liquid crystal resolution, I think is what that standard for.
Yeah. And they would beep, you know, you turn them on, they would beep when there was a fish under the boat. And I remember thinking that is so stupid. And then look where we are today. And then if you think about guys like Gary Hardwick made the Bassmasters Classic the hard way, and Mark Dove made the Bassmasters Classic, 3 times now? Mm-hmm. And Mark's not an offshore fisherman at all. Mark doesn't even need a graph. I mean, he has the nicest Ranger you can buy, and he has equipment like that. But if you think about and I know the fishing was better in our area back then. The fish weren't as pressured, but those guys caught those fish like they were like freaking sticks, and they caught them without all this crap. Like they caught them because they knew the patterns, and they knew what to do when the lakes were falling and high, and they were high and still raising, and they knew the seasonal patterns. And I mean, just think about all that. Like there was no real-time fishing, there was no side imaging, no 360. And those guys caught them as good or better back then as the best of the best do today, taking forward-facing sonar out of it. But like if you took that away, those guys, it was incredible. And I know you had to have guys in Ohio or Northern Kentucky that you looked up to the same way, and you're wondering like, these guys can freaking catch them, and it's all off of instincts.
Oh, I mean, you had guys. I mean, like exactly. I mean, you had guys like, let me see if I can even remember any of them. Gary Dees and Steve Floyd, Neil Ramsey, Greg Hawk.
Greg Hawk. Oh man, I loved him. I thought he was just it back in the day.
How about Dick Schaefer? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, like true legend, local legends. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, and as a kid growing up, I mean, them were the guys you looked up to. You know what I mean? Those were the guys who were dragging them big monster 10-pound sacks up to the weigh-in at Tanner's Creek. You know? But you know, our area has a lot of really good fishermen. A lot of fishermen that have qualified for a Bassmaster Classic through the Federation, and that's just because they're all grinders. The area we grew up in, you had to be a student of the game. You had to learn everything you could learn about seasonal patterns, bait presentations, conditions. And not only that, you had to be a master of presentations. And what I mean by that is being able to cast really good, put your bait in places where other guys weren't, because these areas got lots and lots of pressure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I always, when I'm doing a seminar, you know, everybody thinks that since I'm a pro that I have special secret lures and secret colors and you know baits that, you know, the general public don't get. And we may get some of those occasionally when we're prototyping something, but day in and day out, if you typically get in my boat and look at what I got tied on, it's the same thing that everybody else is using.
Same thing I'm using, same thing Matt's using.
We may just be fishing them a little different, or, you know, doing different angles and putting them in places where other guys won't, you know. So if I could give any of the viewers, listeners, especially the new generation coming up, like any tip, the best tip I could give them was to be like, try not to get hung up on one thing. Try to become a student of the game, be a sponge, absorb all the information you can. Get in a boat with as many as people as you can and learn new things. You know what I mean? Every time I get in a boat with Phil, I learn something from him. I know he learns something from me. And that
every time.
That goes for anybody that I get in a boat with. You know what I mean? I'm always paying attention. I always got my radar on, because you may do something different than I do, and vice versa. But if you can learn something from different people, then your fishing game is going to be way better than it was, right? I always make a funny joke that fish don't read the same books we do. You know what I mean? Just because Bassmaster Magazine says that's the way we got to do it, I mean, that ain't always the rule of thumb. You know what I mean? We're telling you what traditionally works, or maybe how to get a bite, but look, it's different every single day, every hour. And when you become a student of the game and learn all of that and apply it and just time on the water, it sure makes it way more enjoyable when you're out there.
Here's what I know. So I've been lucky. Like you and I was together when I met Cliff Pace, and him and I fished a lot of places and deer hunted and been friends. And what I'm getting at is I've been lucky enough to be in the boat with you, Wesley Strader, Cliff, Fred Rubanis. I don't know how many pros I've been in the boat with, and here's what I know separates you guys from like the older guys, not the new guys coming into it. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all, but the older guys that I've been in the boat with is how quickly you guys, like, people don't like you hear guys say stuff, a negative about the old pros, like on Facebook and stuff. I don't know that they ever really realized that you caught them fish at the St. Johns River, and you basically had 2.5 days to practice, and you hadn't been there in what, a year or two?
Yeah, I think 2 years.
No help. You can't go to the tackle store and say, and you did it in 2.5 days. And for people who, like, I traveled and did the Ever Starts, and I fished some FLW series, and when I fished those, like, if I wanted to practice 10 days, I could. You guys only have 2.5 days, and people don't realize what an incredible feat that is. And here's one thing I know about fishing with all of the pros that I've ever fished with, all of you, and is you guys are so fast at figuring out how to catch them. And then like you remember when we were talking after you finished fourth at the NPFL, and I won't say, you can tell people what you did if you want, but I said, how'd you catch them? And you told me, and you said, yeah, it must have been the right thing. And this is exactly what you said to me. It must have made a big difference because you made a little tiny change with the jig you were flipping. And it was so subtle that most guys would be like, well, that ain't it. And I'm not going to say it if you don't want it to get out. I'll leave that to you when I'm done. But I know what you told me. You said, hey, I sat down and did this, and I got up, man, and I caught him good. And he's like, you said, must have been something to it because the guys around me weren't catching them.
Well, there's two things that was going on there.
Little stuff like that.
We're going to talk about one, but we're not going to talk about
Yeah, I didn't say.
So, I was fishing in the swamp there. It was no secret in this. For those of you that have not been to Santee Cooper in the swamp, it is cypress trees as far as you can see. It's basically like you're deer hunting instead of fishing, right? And the deal that I figured out in there was I'd pitch that tree to the base of the cypress trees, and if I hopped it or did anything else, I wouldn't get a bite, right? I literally had to take that half-ounce jig and drag it through the knees of the cypress trees, right? And for those of you that aren't familiar with fishing cypress trees have a root system that actually grow knees. It's basically like fingers sticking up out of the bottom, right? And I literally had to drag that jig, not hop it, because that's all everybody wants to do when they fish a jig. They want to hop it, right? If I hopped it, I never got a bite. I only had one bite all week that a fish ate it while it was falling down a tree. And that was a 7-pounder that I caught on the third day. But every single bite come by literally dragging that jig through the knees of those cypress trees. So something so simple as hopping it or dragging it made a huge difference, and there was a lot of guys around me, and a lot of the guys caught 12, 14, 15-pound bags, right? And I was able to catch, 20 something, actually 20 something every day. Mm-hmm. So just something that little can make a huge difference. And that's why I stress how important it is to become a student of the game and put yourself in so many different learning scenarios. Because I hear guys all the time say, my fish are gone. My fish have left. They're not there anymore. And 95% of the time, at least in my experience,
that's not the case, is it?
It's not the case ever. Unless something drastic happens, like the water fell, the water rose, the temperature cooled off really bad. Unless something drastic had happened, there's a really good chance that your fish are still there, right? So, let's just kind of run through a little scenario real quick of how many times you've been at a tournament weigh-in and you hear a guy say, well, man, if I'd had one more hour, I would have won the event, right? Like in the last hour, I figured out how to get him to bite, and I caught 3 in the last hour. And if I just had 5 more minutes, right? And I've always said this, and Phil kind of touched on it a little bit about how fast a professional angler can clue in on how to get a bite, right? And I always used Kevin Van Dam in this scenario because he was so fast at figuring out, like, if something changed, he was really fast at figuring out how to make him bite again. Okay. And I always said, like, if Kevin was struggling and he couldn't get a bite, it took him about 45 minutes to figure out how to generate a bite again. Right. Where a guy like myself, and this is going back, years ago, may take me 2 or 3 hours. Right. Where just your weekend guy, and I don't mean nothing bad by that, it may take him all day long once his bite went away to figure that out again. And that comes from time on the water, right? So one thing, and I'll share this with our viewers because I think it's cool, and I always like to try to help out to get guys bites, is I have a process I run through when I'm in an area. Let's say I practiced Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The events typically are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday events, right? So we know things are going to change, right? So let's say the first day I pull into my primary area and I'm not getting any bites. And last day I practiced, I was catching them on a 1/2 ounce jig, right? And now I can't get bit on it, right? Immediately, what I see a lot of guys do is they want to change the color of their jig, right? Well, it was green pumpkin yesterday. Let's try black and blue, or vice versa, right? Typically for me, I don't ever change the color. Once again, unless something drastic happens, right? My first thing that I'm going to change is always rate of fall. Okay. And what I mean by that is if I'm catching them on a 1/2 ounce jig in practice and I'm not getting bit on that the first day of the event, I'm either going to go lighter or I'm going to go heavier. Okay. And what I mean by that is if I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce and not getting bit, I may go down to a 3/8 to try to get a slower fall. Okay. Or I may go the other way and put on a 5/8 to get a faster fall. Okay. And typically, anywhere I've ever been in the country, now look, this is with largemouth, smallmouth. I've done this using a Ned rig for smallmouth, slow it down or speed it up. Typically, that rate of fall change will get you bit. And Phil has seen me do this on the Ohio River, flipping a Zoom centipede with a 16th ounce weight versus a 1/4 ounce weight. He's seen it a million times. But what I'm getting at is that is my first thing to try before I change anything else. And typically, that's the exact thing that triggers a bite, or you figure out how to get a bite again. Second thing for me is going to be, obviously, I'm going to start playing with colors. But typically, day in, day out, it's rate of fall. Okay. It's either rate of fall, color, or they have went from what I'm going to call a horizontal presentation or a vertical presentation. Okay. What I mean by that is, to me, a horizontal presentation is a flipping jig, flipping a brush hog, something like that, where you're letting that bait go in and go to the bottom, right? Then we talk about that horizontal presentation where you're throwing a square bill or a spinnerbait or something like that. So that's kind of my general 3 rules of thumb because, like I said, unless something drastic happened, those fish are probably still there. You just got to figure out how to make them bite again.
Wow, that's great.
How many times on the river do you and I fish together and we never, ever, ever throw the same sinker, even if we're flipping, do we? Never.
No, we want to figure out what the best deal is for the day.
I remember vividly, it's been 5 or 6 years ago, and I think we might have just been fun fishing, or maybe we went fishing I had a BFL or something, and you weren't fishing. I can't remember, but you remember going out on the river, and we were flipping that little KVD flatworm,
That's been like 10 years ago, just so you know.
Well, it might have been, but we were fishing all day and hardly getting any bites, were we? And if you remember, I sat down because you had been flipping like a 1/4, 3/16, and like a 5/16 jig. And if you remember, I put on a 3/8 ounce sinker behind you and wrecked them. And if you remember, we like wrecked them after that, didn't we? And that was the only. And I remember you kept
went from getting no bites to every piece of wood you pitch on, you get a bite.
Like literally every piece on the main river. And Billy would pick up a lighter sinker with the same worm, and they would not touch it. And you flip that other one in there, and it goes to the bottom like a bomb. And you never picked it up once. They were on it on that fast initial fall. That's one thing that's one thing that has really stuck with me.
Well,
that one day in particular, not because we caught a lot of fish, because of how much of a difference that little change made.
Well, I could guarantee you, like, you could look back on all your events that you've had on Monroe and Patoka fishing offshore, and simply changing the weight on a big worm or the size of a football head jig or something like that, that made a huge difference. You know what I mean? Even fishing offshore like that.
I remember J.R. Mullins is a good friend of mine. You met J.R. And we won a tourney at Monroe one time, and it was the same way. The lake was like 12 feet high and falling. And this is going to, what got me about this day was what they were on. So when Monroe's 12 feet high, like there was probably thousands of extra acres flooded, right? Wouldn't you think? And it was falling like 2-3 inches a day. And I remember it had like 160 boats. It was like packed. And I caught one on a 5/8 or 3/4 ounce black and blue jig on a what do you call? I just had a brain. What do you call the oak tree that's got that's real thick? Not a bur oak. What are they called? Pin oak. You know how the pin oak trees are? They got those real thick little short limbs that come out off of them. And once we caught one on just a little point going up in Crooked Creek on a pin oak. The rest of the day, we targeted pin oaks. The rest of the day with that big jig. And I remember JR threw a lot of other stuff and it didn't work. But if you would find a pin oak on the end of that tree, on the end of that deal, and they were like in 10, 12 feet of water, it was an automatic. And at the end of the day, we had like 5 that weighed like almost 25 or 26 pounds and won that event. And we were never more than 50 to 100 yards from another boat. Most of the field was up there, but I don't know if they didn't. The pin oaks are really hard you got to pitch a jig in there, and it's so thick, you got to feed it down literally. But it was amazing to me how we never got one bite that day on anything but a pin oak tree.
Well, that's what I always talk about, how you can be so close, but so far away, just by something so simple as rate of fall or color or just something. And so many times, I'm guilty of it still to this day. You miss it.
We all do.
You just miss it because, look, fishing is nothing but a big puzzle. And every bite, everything that happens is a puzzle piece. And if you don't pay attention and you don't realize what you were doing to get a bite, then it's so easy to miss.
Yeah. So Bill, here's a hypothetical question for you. So for the rest of your career, you have 2 baits, 2 rods, 2 reels. What are those 2 rods? Or what are those 2 baits, those 2 rods, and those 2 reels?
Guess. Don't lie.
I guess if I had to, that's tough because typically it's just like, hey, what's the one bait? You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm a really big fan of a 4-inch flipping tube. That's kind of I just grew up fishing with that. You know what I mean? So it's just one of my really favorite baits. But can
I pick the other one? Can I guess?
I'm not picking the tube because I got another one I'm going to pick, but I'm just going to throw that one out there, right?
Yeah. Honorable mention.
But yeah, let's hear what you think, Phil.
Well, I know one of them is a swim jig and probably a black and blue.
Yeah. So everybody that knows me knows I'm like, if I was known for something, it's probably swimming a jig. Mm-hmm. That would definitely have to be one, right? I'm a lot different swim jig fisherman than a lot of guys are. And
yeah, exactly.
when it comes to swim jigs, I'm like anal. Like everything's got a reason I do it. Everything has a purpose. I like a 7'6" medium heavy fast action rod, right? And what that is basically it's a rod that has a lot of backbone, but it's got a soft tip. It's almost like a heavy action spinnerbait rod. Okay. And I'll talk about the reason I choose that, but always, I don't care where I'm at in the country. I don't care if the water's dirty, if it's clean, 30-pound Tactex Seaguar braid all the time. I use a high-speed reel, a 7.1 arc gravity 7 reel, and obviously my flipping rod's an arc rod as well. My big rod's an arc rod. Actually in the process of working on one of those right now, so kind of excited about that.
Yeah.
High speed reel, because with the combination of the high speed reel and the long rod is because so many swim jig bites are so fast and so violent that the fish get you out of position a lot, right? So the high speed reel and the longer rod gives me the ability to keep up with that fish and get a good hook set, right? When it comes to the rod, having that real good backbone but a soft tip, what that does is it lets you shake the tip of the rod versus shaking the whole rod. There's a deal called the Alabama shake, right? Where you shake the heck out of the rod to get that jig pulsating, right? Well, by having that little softer tip rod, you can shake the rod and not the whole thing, and the tip of the rod gets going. I get a lot of guys in my boat that they're like, you're not even shaking that thing. You're just reeling it through the water. But they just aren't paying attention to the tip of the rod because it has a softer tip. The other thing that little bit of softer tip rod does is when that fish comes up there and gets it, you have less tendency to be able to take that bait away from that fish because the tip of the rod gives it to them. Because you're always, I'm always swimming it on braid. Jig wise, look, there's so many options. The sky's the limit when it comes to colors and sizes. I have a whole signature series line of swim jigs from Lure Parts Online. My favorite size is probably our 1/4 ounce, right?
Which is different than 75% of the guys.
75%, and a lot of guys look, like, I'm not going to lie, a lot of guys didn't like the 1/4 ounce at all, right? Mm-hmm. Because the 1/4 ounce was built for a specific technique, a specific purpose, and that was what I call floating a jig, right? And I did this exact same thing at the St. Johns River. When I won, because the water was kind of cold, they wanted that jig really slow. But what that 1/4 ounce head does gives you the ability, and I always call it floating the jig, and keep it around the piece of structure as long as you possibly can, right? And that's what the 1/4 ounce does. But so many guys that use that 1/4 that really want to fish a swim jig fast, it would lay on its side. It wouldn't do what they wanted it to do. And they were like, this thing's a piece of junk, right? Well, once you explain to them what it's for, they're like, a light bulb goes off and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
They got 4 Gamakatsu hooks in them. It's a really good quality jig. And that 1/4 ounce is my favorite size. We built a 5/16 for the guys that, like, I'm not even going to buy that 1/4. 5/16 is a very popular size. And 5/16 is actually the size I used at the St. Johns River because I was using a Zoom Super Speed Carl as the trailer, and it has very big kicky legs, right? And when you get a trailer on your swim jig that has a lot of water resistance, a lot of kicking action, it'll make that 1/4 ounce want to lay on its side, right? And look, any swim jig that's laying on its side is a recipe for disaster, okay? When you're fishing that swim jig, you want it to run perfectly straight up and down, because if it gets on its side like this and that fish comes up there and gets it, the hook's already in his mouth sideways, right? And you have a tendency to pull that bait right out of the fish's mouth. So that's why I went with the 5/16, because it was letting me keep that swim jig straight up and down. It's also available in a 3/8, and we're in the process of building a 1/2 ounce as we speak. And I'll use the 3/8 and the 1/2 ounce if I'm fishing in thicker lily pads, or maybe I want to get that jig down a little deeper. But day in and day out for me, it's going to be that 1/4 or that 5/16 ounce size. So that would be my number one bait, probably. It'd be a toss up for me between that tube and the jig, a regular flipping jig. If I'm going to pick a jig, it's going to be a 3/8 ounce. To me, that's probably one of the most versatile sizes there is for flipping, pitching, dragging on structure. Mm-hmm. Every species that swims is going to eat a jig, whether that be a smallmouth, a largemouth, a spot, depending on the trailer you put on it, the color that it is. But I think if you took a 3/8 ounce black and blue or green pumpkin jig with a Zoom super chunk on it, whether that be the regular super chunk, the junior, the big salty, whatever that may be. I think you can take those two baits anywhere in the country, any time of the year, and be very successful.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's funny. Like, I learned that from you, and I throw a quarter almost exclusively. Really, if I wanted to go faster, I just changed the trailer. But I would bet you that if you called Tackle Warehouse and said, "What are the bulk of your swim jigs?" So doesn't matter the brand. What's the two sizes you sell the most? It'll be 3/8 and a half for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. When you
Quarter,
get that,
quarter won't even be a player.
I've pulled that little quarter ounce and give it to a lot of the anglers on the tour, right? And they're like, "Oh, well, this thing's cute and fluffy." You know what I mean? But it has a purpose. And look, when they're on that deal, like, there ain't nothing going to beat it. Like, it is like, it's the deal. So, yeah, like I said, if I had to pick, it's going to be a flipping jig. It's going to be a swim jig. Now, when I'm flipping that jig around, I'm always going to flip it on fluorocarbon. My favorite size is probably, it's either going to be 20 or 22 pound Tatsu Seaguar fluorocarbon, 7'6" heavy action flipping rod, limited and Invoker limited rod from ARC, and once again a high speed reel. But yeah, I mean, like, if you had to narrow me down to two deals, that's probably going to be it.
Those are them, huh? Those are them. Well,
I would have picked a black neon tube or a green pumpkin tube in your swim jig if I was picking for you, just from fishing hundreds of times with you. I would almost bet that's what the two you would have said.
Yeah, the tube just gets a lot of bites.
Yeah.
But that jig, boy, it sure gets some big ones. Catch big ones on a tube because you can, but
yeah,
I don't know. Just something that, like, when you're up there flipping a big black and blue jig on a big heavy rod, just makes you feel like Denny Brower. You know what I mean?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's something to be said for the way that all of you guys that travel and fish, there's a lot of guys that are really good on their home lake. Like, they would be really hard if KVD come to Brookville and he didn't have like a lot of experience on the lake. There are local guys here that he would have a really hard time beating on Brookville. If they fished 5 days, they'd beat him 3 or 4. But it's a totally different ball game when you have to get in your truck like you do and drive 1,000 miles and show up and catch them. Because a lot of the guys that fish here, and I'm just going to say it, if they had to fish anywhere but here, like away from home, without help, they'd fall on their nose.
It's
because they don't fish away from home very often to learn, is what I'm getting at.
Well, the biggest thing is, it's like, look, it's hard enough to have fish for a 1-day tournament, let alone have enough fish for a 4-day event, right? And, like Phil said, I got to jump in the truck and go. And I mean, I may leave home in February and not get home for any amount of time till September. You know what I mean?
Well, look how long you were just gone.
Yeah. I mean, I've been gone since we left the start of the year. I've been home for less than 10 hours. I come back from South Carolina and dropped Jennifer and the kids off in the camper at the house. I repacked. I got home at 8 o'clock, repacked my truck and boat, headed to Lake of the Ozarks for ultimate match fishing. And so I went to bed at midnight. I got up the next morning at like 8 or 9 o'clock, jumped in the truck and took off. And then they flew to the Classic to meet me, because I had to go to the Classic and do media and all that. I'm currently at Express Boats in Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Had to come here and do a few things, and we are going to head home in the morning. Basically slide into the driveway, repack the boat, repack the truck, get the camper ready, dogs to the vet. Phil's going to come cut my grass.
I might
check the mail, and then we're going to be right back on the road again for the next elite, which is on the Pascatank River in North Carolina. We have immediately after that Lake Norman NPFL. Immediately after that, another elite at Lake Hartwell. And then we start heading back south for the Texas swing of Lake Fork and the Sabine River. So it's I'm fortunate and blessed that the family travel the country with me. They have ever since the kids been born. Kids are homeschooled. We live in the RV on the road, and yeah, I got an awesome team. Team Scream is what they nicknamed them out here on the road. So it's our lifestyle. That's what we do. I honestly couldn't do it. I know I couldn't do it without them being out here, because I would never want to get that phone call from Nevaeh or Fisher saying, "Hey, Dad, when you coming home?" You know what I mean? And you could potentially not be coming home for a month. You know what I mean? That phone call would break my heart. But like I said, I've been so blessed that they get to travel with me, and it's like I said, it's our lifestyle, and yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, Bill, I sure do appreciate you taking.
I got one more question for him.
Uh-oh.
You and I had this conversation while we were waiting on Billy to get his boat undone and everything. Do you remember, like in the past, like green pumpkin and black and blue have always been a big deal since I remember when green pumpkin come out. Before then, it was probably like brown and orange was probably a replacement for green pumpkin, wouldn't you think?
Probably.
I mean, back in the day, it was black and blue, black and chartreuse, green pumpkin, or black and brown. But do you remember when we were younger? I don't mean like kids, like I was, like Matt and I were talking. I've been thinking about this just lately because I'm coming out with this new line of spinner baits, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Like years ago, like I remember when a yellow spinnerbait or yellow and black, or like, I don't know if you ever did this, but I was telling Matt, like, I remember when I would throw a brown and orange spinnerbait in the spring with a copper blade, a copper single spin. And I'm going to tell you, it caught them. It caught them really good. And I remember, like, like, I'm sure that you and Matt know who Ricky Green was.
Mm-hmm.
And Ricky Green, I don't know how many times you would see him fishing. And a lot of times, if the water was clear, he was throwing a solid blue spinnerbait. If it was dirty, he would throw chartreuse and blue. What do you think about them old colors? Because no one, I mean, they're rarely talked about or mentioned. Do you think fish just got so burned out and it's like inbred into them? Or do you think them old colors would still catch them maybe better than the popular colors now? Because these new fish have never seen those colors.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. And he calls me with stuff like this all the time. And I'm like, really? I mean, like, this is the conversation we're having?
Yeah. He's like, don't you have something else to worry about?
I got to put up with all the time, right? And here's what I'm going to say on that is that I've always said this, and he knows that I've always said this. Colors are to catch fishermen, okay?
That's why I asked the question.
And what I mean by that is, look, we got an endless supply of colors with skirt materials and soft plastics and things like that, that it can honestly get overwhelming, right? And I always say, like, if you were to carry black and blue, green pumpkin, June bug, right? And that June bug is because of tannicky type colored water, right? And you carried something bright, whether that be pink, which that's Phil's favorite color, or chartreuse or something like that.
Pink is really good in the spring.
Then something white, okay? If you carried those 5 colors, you could go anywhere in the country and never need another color. And then if you wanted to add chartreuses or orange or blues, you can do that with any of the dye markers we have, right? But what I'm saying is, like,
you're dodging the question.
No, I'm not. I'm getting ready to answer it right now. It all boils down to what you got confidence in, okay? If you got confidence in a brown and orange spinnerbait with a copper blade on it, and that's what you throw, that's probably what you're going to catch them on, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you got a bait tied on it, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a glide bait, a spinnerbait, a jig, a big worm, a crankbait. It does not matter what it is. If you don't have any confidence in it, there's a really good chance that you're not going to catch anything on it because, one, you're not going to throw it long enough to even have an opportunity, right? Yeah. And we as fishermen all have our favorite colors. And at the end of the day, they're pretty much all exactly the same colors. Now, there's days when they want that brown jig with a little bit of orange in it. But day in and day out, if you really stop and think about it, those 5 colors that we just talked about, you could go anywhere in the country. And if you just add it as a general rule of thumb, look at it like this. The dirtier or darker the water is, the darker you want your color to be, okay? And as that progressively changes to cleaner water, you want your colors to be lighter. You know what I mean? So yeah. Black and blues, purples, June bugs, and that darker, dirtier water, as it gets cleaner, green pumpkins, watermelons, watermelon reds, things like that. So as a general rule of thumb, if you keep it simple like that, I think you'd be a lot happier, a lot less confused. But then you got
I'm not coming out with those colors, but I'm thinking
guys like.
But why do you think you quit throwing them?
That want all these colors, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's, and I do truly believe that colors run in phases, like, blues and yellows, or just completely school bus yellow is a color we never even hear about
anymore. Yeah.
So good that if you were to throw school bus yellow right now, you'd catch them, right? But like I said, it all boils down to having confidence in it. And when you have confidence in it, that's what you're going to throw. And if you catch them, that's what you're going to catch them on, right?
But why do you think we quit throwing yellow spinner baits? Because 25, 30 years ago, everybody threw one. I mean, why do you think? I mean, like, I'm pretty sure if you come out with a yellow one, you wouldn't sell it very good. Why do you think that is?
Because back then, that was the only options we had. We didn't have silicone where we had every color under the rainbow. We had yellow, we had blue rubber, we had black rubber, we had brown rubber, and white rubber. That was it. Like, you didn't have an option.
We just threw them out of necessity.
And now
I do think about that, because I remember the first time I saw a chartreuse bait. I'd never even heard that word before.
Well, it's like we didn't have any options. You know what I mean? Phil, if like you just think about it, like it's no different than you loading ammunition for your rifle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Back in the day, you had one load, one cartridge you could shoot. Well, now you can go in your shop and fine tune you a load to get exactly what you want. And it's no different now. And back in the day, we didn't have them choices. Or now we have the option to make endless colors of whatever we want.
Well, when you're home, next time we go fishing at the water stain, I'm going to throw a brown and orange with a copper blade behind you and just see. Because I've been thinking about that a lot. Is like, why we quit throwing something that actually worked.
That's why you haven't been catching much lately.
Well, you might be right, because I've had a
pretty just figured it out.
Years. No, he's
Bill,
right. You know what he tells me? We have this conversation every time we're in the barn. And he's like, you're trying too hard. And I think there's a lot to that, because I won most of everything I ever tried to win. And I could not win a BF or IBF, could I, Billy? And I would tell him I want to win an IBF. I want to win an IBF. And I would go and like suck. And then he's like, dude, you're trying too hard. So then I just went fishing and won one, right? That's that same couple of years ago. And he's like, dude, just quit worrying about it and go fishing. I think there is something to that, isn't there? It's all up here. Just trying too hard. Just go fishing.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah. So I can attribute that to him. And probably I got a second too in one.
It's no different than what we talked about at the beginning of the show. I've been trying too hard the last few years. And look, when it's going bad, the harder you try, the worse it gets. So with that being said, for me to start the year out just going to go fishing the way I fish and have fun, and it worked out like I couldn't have scripted it any better. So I guess with that being said, at the end of the day, just go fishing, have fun, and if it's your time, it's your time. The good Lord looks out for every one of us, and when it's your time, it's your time. You can't do nothing wrong. So just go fishing, have fun, enjoy life, and treat people the way you want to be treated, and the world would be a better place.
Well, my year last year was so bad I couldn't even beat Jennifer. You know, I'm telling the truth.
Well, she can fish really good.
Is she back? Isn't she good? I thought she'd run right up here to say something.
Yeah, she's back there. She actually caught one today. She probably caught one bigger than the one you caught today.
I guarantee it. I ain't caught one yet this year. It's nasty out.
Yeah, she caught one here at the house we're staying at, right on the lake, and can you see it?
There you go.
Yeah, look at that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she showed out. I didn't catch one, but she did.
I'm awesome.
It's funny when you guys go fishing. Nevaeh and Fisher will be in the middle. You're in the front, and Jennifer actually sits down in the back and catches them behind you guys. Every time. I see it.
You know why? Because she doesn't try too hard.
She just sits right there and enjoys being there, doesn't she?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
And she's killed. Well, how many deer she killed with a bow? Turkeys and She goes down there when it's so crappy and cold in January that I don't even want to go no more because I'm burned out. And she goes down there and sets in a blind and kills them good ones down there. You know where I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like really nasty, like not 30 degrees. It's like nasty. It's snowing. And I'll be like, what's Jen doing? He'll be like, oh, she got in the truck. She gets in the truck, goes by herself, doesn't she? She goes down there and sets in a blind.
Then she calls me, hey, I got one. You got to come get it.
Yeah. Well, it was fun.
Yeah.
And I hope people get an insight. Like you don't see that much what we talked about on podcast. I hope people, and we'll have you on again, and we'll have you on once in a while. We'll just pick a bait category or a lake. Maybe we'll talk about tidal water, or you fish the Delta in Cal. We'll talk about all these different places, and maybe people.
Well, we need the fun stuff. We need to get back to teaching and learning. And I mean, look, you're never too old to learn. I learn every single day. I know, Matt, I know you do. Phil, I know you do as well. And you're never too old to learn. And I feel like, a lot of this stuff has kind of got away from that, and kind of cool and refreshing to be on here and just talk about fishing. You know what I mean? So
now some of the social media has gotten mean. Yeah, I mean, it's not just fishing. Like, I get on there and see posts that people make, and I'm just because someone else gave their opinion and they might not agree with it. Well, the last I checked is you can vote for whoever you want. That's what makes this country special. And look, I love this country. I've been to other countries and hunting and stuff, and like, this is the best of the lot, in my opinion. And like, you can't get on Facebook and give your opinion about something without somebody calling you a crying, you know what, or
well,
they hope you break your rod or your boat blows up. I mean, I don't get it.
We're all entitled to our opinion, whether that's right or wrong, but don't hate me for my opinion, because I'm not going to hate you for yours,
But
that's what makes the world go round. And like I said, it was refreshing to get on here and not talk about the drama and talk about fishing and family and just whatever. So anytime y'all want me to come back, you just holler.
Hey, before you go, I know 3 other, excuse me, I got a cough on. I know 3 other guys who did what you did and deserve it. I mean, like Brandon Polinick, what he did at Okeechobee with 3 other boats around him and all them spectators in that part of the canal was incredible. And then you've got Jason Christie. We already congratulated Easton. Jason Christie, what he pulled off at the MPFL, kind of made spinnerbait fishing great again. I mean, all of those guys really deserve their. And I know Jason really did you a really stand-up thing down there at the St. John's. And I thought it was really cool that he did what he did for you, and then he went and won 2 tourneys later. So I think he really deserved that.
He pulled in where I was at and asked me how I'd done. I said, hey, I got 24 pounds. He said, look, I'm out of here. You got a chance to win. And he rolled out of there. You know what I mean? He knows that I'd have done the same thing for him. And had he not and stayed in there, he could have potentially caught a 5 or 6 pounder that would have affected the outcome. And
karma, Billy.
I owe him. It's always, I always say karma. It comes back around to get you. And, he did that for me. And then the next week he wins MPFL at
karma. Good karma.
That's right. You live right, do things right, treat people the way you want to be treated. It all comes back around.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Well, Bill, really appreciate your time. I know you've got just a crazy schedule, and thank you for joining. It was a really great catching up with you. Any parting words before we drop you out? And
I think team scream. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. You know what I mean? Like, just I think we kind of closed it out with, just treat people the way you want to be treated, and life would be great.
That's it.
See you later, Jen Lowen, Fisher.
All right. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks, Bill. All right, Phil. Wow, what an episode. I know we went over there, but man, there's just so much to talk about. Really look forward to having him on the show again. Any parting words from you? Anything you want to talk about before we hop off of here?
No, I think it was cool, to just talk about fishing. I don't even know how long it's been, but I'm sure it's way more than the hour that we wanted. But it was fun, and I've had so many good times with Bill Lowen. like in the mountains out in Colorado, bow hunting for elk when they're bugling, to sitting in an old wet pit in Arkansas, and pheasant, bird hunting and I mean, it's the guy's pretty lucky. I'm lucky. I've got 5 or 6 friends like that have been lifelong friends, and I know you probably have too. You and I have got to be friends, and we had Mario on last week, and there's never a better dude than Mario. Mario Mills is as good as they come, and Rob Erickson, and I want to do a night where if people don't want to see this, they can comment and let you know. But there's a group of us that do boat shows together, and if people knew how much fun. You don't always go with us because you live real close, like to the indie show, and I know you got a wife at home. They do too, but some of them are further away. And we go out and eat, and the conversations that we have, and we talk about fishing constantly. Yep. Like it's not like it's just something we do on a podcast, and we've had so much fun. You know what I mean? And it just I hope it just continues.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far, and I know right when we started this, Phil, one of the things that you said is you wanted to have Bill Lowen on. I know that it means a lot to you, and I know how much Bill means to you. So, I mean, it was awesome to hear you guys cut up and tell stories, and just how much you guys mean to each other. That's awesome, and that's rare.
Yeah, and nothing makes me happier than when we fished against each other and I beat him. Just so you know, I want every time we fished against each other, I want to beat him so bad I can't stand it. You know what I mean? Yep. And then he's fished a couple Wednesday nighters with Fisher, and actually I've fished tourneys. I've had Fisher be my team partner. He's going to be more now that he's getting bigger, and he'll call me up and he'll be like, Uncle Phil, come get me. Let's go fishing in the evenings, But yeah. When they fished against me and my partner, like at Brookville and smaller tourneys, Fisher will start if he caught him. He'll start yelling before we even get the boat back to the weigh-in. I can hear him telling me how he's beat us and we can't catch him. This is the funniest thing ever. And he'll tell everybody at the weigh-in, like on Wednesday nights, I beat Phil. So it's just funnier. And so I know them two live for it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we will see you next time. Next Tuesday or next Wednesday, we have another episode coming out. Mm-hmm. We're going to film that here soon and get that ready. But please go on our YouTube channel, subscribe. Part of the plea here is to get some subscription so that we can do some really cool stuff. Phil and I have been talking about being able to do lives and things like that. So we have to get our subscriptions up there for YouTube to allow us to do that. So please go subscribe. Hey, get somebody out in the outdoors. We talked about it earlier. I was blessed. Bill was blessed. And Bill was also blessed to be able to grow up in the outdoors. So take somebody fishing.
Yeah. And as this goes on, we're going to have some cool giveaways. I'm going to give away $140 glide baits. And I know Gary Nesty told me at Solar Bat that he would give some free glasses, once we start getting the viewership grows. And we may get to where every Wednesday we give away like 3 or 4 balsa baits for one viewer. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, we can do that easily, or maybe we'll give a jig packet or a buzzer kind of seasonally, the baits you would throw then. So, so there's a reason also too, because we're going to give away a lot of stuff throughout the year.
Absolutely. Well, Phil, we will see you next week. Thank you everybody for joining and listening to the Limit Podcast, Season 1, Episode 3. We'll see you next week.